Saviors of Uldum called it 8 new cards, some pretty exciting stuff, including the return of legendary quests. So let's talk about these cards.
Hey buddy, watch this.
As always, if you don't have a lot of time, there is a link to some quick reviews in the description where I just rate these cards from 1 to 5 stars. Otherwise, let's go ahead and jump into some detailed reviews of these new cards and even a new mechanic. Let's start off with Supreme Archaeology here for Warlock, a new legendary quest. That's crazy. That's awesome. They're coming back. Of course, a 1-mana spell. It's got a requirement to draw 20 cards, and a reward is Tome of Origination, which is a new hero power coming in at 2 mana. It draws you a card, and that card costs 0. Now, just to be clear, that's a really, really powerful hero power, right? 0 cost reduction is insane. Like, you can do all kinds of craziness when your cards don't cost anything, and drawing a card in your hero power is really, really good too. So there's very little doubt here that reward is amazing. The question is, how easy is it going to be to draw 20 cards? Well, you guys may finally get one on me on Plot Twist, because with a card like Plot Twist, maybe it's not that hard to draw 20 cards. And in fact, you can draw 20 cards without running out of cards, which is a big problem for this card otherwise, because if you're just drawing 20 cards normally, you're only going to have something like 5 to 7 cards left after your normal opening hand. So there are all kinds of issues of having enough stuff. But Plot Twist can help fix that problem. So between Warlock's natural card draw, between Plot Twist, suddenly that becomes a really interesting idea. And if you have combo pieces that you can shuffle back into your deck and then draw them for 0 mana using your hero power, suddenly the gears start turning and I'm coming up with some pretty crazy ideas. So yes, I think this card has a lot of fun potential to not only empower some old stuff, but turn Cycle Warlock into a real sort of deck, because that hero power is just so good. What exactly will it look like? I don't know, but I can tell that a card like this has enough raw power to bring on some pretty interesting moments in Hearthstone. So moving on here to the Druid quest, it's Untapped Potential. Again, of course, the 1-mana legendary spell. You have to end 4 turns with any unspent mana for this one. So basically, you have to float some mana on 4 different occasions, and your reward is the Osirian Tear, which is a passive hero power that your choose 1 cards have both effects combined. Now, I think this card's a little bit opposite of our previous legendary quest in that I think this one's a little easier to activate in some ways, because it's floating mana is not a hard thing to do. You know, maybe you pass your hero power on turn 2, you don't do anything on turn 1, and you're halfway there, right? And then just a couple more turns, and boom, job done. I think that's easy. But I'm not sure the reward here is quite as strong for a card like Osirian Tear. Clearly getting, you know, powerful choose 1 effects like, you know, Druid of the Claw is awesome, right? You get a 4/6 with charge. That's much better than normal, but you lose your normal hero power, which is often a good way to have some mana flexibility and get some extra oomph out of any given turn. So that's a little bit of a downside. Plus, there are just a limited number of choose 1 cards. Now, we might see some crazy options offered in Saviors of Uldum, so you know that could change it, and choose 1 is an effect that can grow over time and can be better than it is now. At the moment, it feels like it's a little restricted. You know, of course, Power of the Wild is fantastic too, but is this the kind of thing you're looking to do in a token deck? Probably not floating a lot of mana in a more token style deck. So I think you're expecting, you know, mid to late game choose 1 effects where you really see the power in this. It has to be at least after turn 4, because that's the earliest you could float 4 mana. So you got to think more mid to late game, and then I start seeing more challenges. Is it going to do enough at that point in the game? Is just gaining 1 extra little effect going to get there? You know, is dealing 4 damage with Wrath worth it? We saw some pretty powerful things back in the day from Fandral Staghelm, which had this same effect, but I don't feel like it was like game winning. So will this just be a complementary piece as opposed to something fundamental, maybe like the previous card? So it doesn't feel like it has that star potential. It's not going to be the card that like defines your deck, but certainly it's fine if a deck finds it. I think it's probably going to end up being a fairly mediocre looking card at the end of the day, but certainly something to keep an eye on. And you could probably toss into a deck without losing a whole lot as long as you have some choose 1 cards in there. It should be noted, one thing I just thought of after finishing that review is that this is a 1-mana spell, so you won't be floating mana on turn 1. So really the soonest you'd be doing this is on turn 5, which pushes it back even farther and delays it even more. So I think that's a extra challenge for Untapped Potential. I think this card is going to struggle. I don't know that it's going to have enough reward for the just cost of running it in your deck. Not that it's particularly hard to achieve. It's just going to be a card slot. It's going to be a mulligan slot. which has been a challenge for Quest in the past, and I think it's going to be a really big challenge for this one. So now let's talk about the Restless Mummy, a new warrior card with Rush and Reborn. What's that? Well, Reborn is a new keyword that essentially means after this minion dies for the first time, it comes back to life with 1 health. So the Restless Mummy here, you can trade it into a 3/3. It will instantly resurrect itself, and you'll be able to trade it in again since it has Rush. So a card like this is great at going 2 for 1. You're going to often trade it into 2 things. There's so many games in Hearthstone where your opponent will have a couple, 3 health things or a 2-drop and a 3-drop on board. You go into your turn 4, and this can remove both of those things, which feels like a really powerful effect to me. This card looks just strong. It's going to take some great value trades, and going 2 for 1 is often good, particularly in something like Arena. This card could be absolutely nuts, but in Constructed, I still think it has some playability. Now, will it compete with things like the mech package that we know Warrior for today? At the moment, no. It doesn't look better than, every mech having Rush, but fundamentally, at some level, this card still has some strengths that, even if not in this meta, will probably pop up in another meta as a relevant mid-rangey defensive clear sort of card. And Reborn as a mechanic is really intriguing too. I'm sure that will create some friction and problems for your opponent. The opportunity to just trade 1 card for 2 of your opponents going 2 for 1 is a really, really good deal in Hearthstone. So I think Restless Mummy and Reborn in general look like pretty strong options. So now let's talk about the Plague of Death in this horrifying card art. It's like the saddest card art we've ever seen in Hearthstone. Poor camels, poor armadillo, even the hyena getting sucked into this sand trap, a Sarlacc pit. I don't know what it is, but this is a 9-mana pre-spell that silences and destroys all minions. So basically, this is that Twisting Nether that's still good against death rattles. And sure, a card like this looks to have some strengths to me. We know Twisting Nether is a playable card. We know Priest is a class that can go late into the game. So having that universal removal tool can be pretty valuable to just reset things and then go from there. Particularly, there's a lot of sticky death rattle stuff out there today, a lot of mechs with tokens and all these annoying things to deal with, and Plague of Death will just wipe those out perfectly as the ultimate universal board clear. Going to be glad to use this as an example moving forward for things to just resolve it all. And for that reason, absolutely, it looks strong to me. 9 mana is a little slow, right? So if you're trying to play it in an anti-aggro meta, its Mass Hysteria is probably still going to take the cake as your mid-game removal tool, but you might toss one of these in. If a deck is greedy enough or the meta goes slow enough, Plague of Death will be a perfect option for those big late-game clears. So absolutely looks playable. So now let's talk about an even bigger spell, Puzzle Box of Yogg-Saron, 10-mana mage spell, cast 10 random spells, targets chosen randomly. So it really is just Yogg-Saron, but without the body, without the stick. And it always works, unlike Yogg-Saron, right, which will sometimes kill himself and not actually cast that many spells. Unlike the old Yogg-Saron nowadays, he can backfire, but this will always get your 10 spells, no matter what, unless somebody dies, of course. So a little bit more reliable than Yogg-Saron in some ways, and I think actually a moderately competitively viable card. We saw in the past Yogg-Saron could just take games that were unwinnable and flip them back into your favor, and you could somehow pull out a victory on the back of all that craziness. It's that Hail Mary sort of play. Puzzle Box of Yogg-Saron could do the exact same thing. In a greedy, slow mage deck, you're out of answers, you're out of options, you have no way to win a game. You play Yogg-Saron, it draws you 5 cards, it clears your opponent's board, it summons a bunch of stuff, and boom, you're back in the game. And I think a deck could run one of these. You probably don't run 2 of these, but maybe just one as that last-ditch effort. Beyond that, it's going to come off random spell generation too. There are lots of different ways to generate random spells in Mage. So this card is going to have a big impact on the meta, even if it's not necessarily being played in lists. That's a little scary, a little problematic even maybe. I'm nervous that this is going to create some bad moments in Hearthstone. They'll be crazy and they'll be fun for one person, but maybe unfun for the other. But regardless, I do think this actually has competitive viability beyond just those meme random generation effects. I think a deck here or there could actually toss a one of Puzzle Box of Yogg-Saron into their list. So now let's talk about the Evil Totem for Shaman, a 2-mana 0/2 totem that at the end of your turn adds a lackey to your hand. This looks like an awesome card. We are presumably getting new lackeys, or at least we were told we were getting new lackeys at some point. We don't know what those are yet, but as long as the lackey pool remains as competitive as it is today, which is to say very, very strong, Evil Totem would be amazing. If you look at a card like Evil Cable Rat, that's being played in a lot of different decks, just generating 1 lackey, and this card will always generate you 1 lackey when you play it, and it has that upside of potentially generating more. And I think that inherently makes it a cool little play. There are some Totem synergies that are possible as well. I don't think you see Totemic Might being run with this card necessarily, but if it just sticks around for a turn or 2, 1 lackey's good. 2 makes a card like this insanely valuable. So yes, there may be a deck that can try to protect an early play, or just some metas that leave this around that don't have easy answers to it. There are always the backstabs out there, I suppose. But there are windows and pockets where a card like this could survive, generate that long-term value. We've seen it with Mana Tide Totem in the past, and although that is a 3 health minion, it also costs 3 mana. So if Evil Totem is in that same space as Mana Tide Totem, where it can hang around for a couple turns, it's going to generate a lot of additional value. If you think about Ethereal Lackeys alone, right, that's another card it turns into. Suddenly this one thing might turn into 4 or 5 different instances of additional resources, and that's a lot of value. So there are certainly some decks that could use this in a sneaky strong way. Up next here, we have the Questing Explorer, 2 mana, 2/3 Battlecry. If you control a quest, draw a card. So that's like the perfect 1/2 opener for a quest deck, right? Getting a nice 2/3 minion on board that's also cycling into something new. That's probably a dream for a lot of classes that are running a quest. So this absolutely looks playable at that level. There's a little bit of downside with this card that if you've completed your quest already and then you top deck this later, it's just a 2 mana 2/3. So some decks may not be reliant on a card like this. Say for instance, Warlock may not need it because they have their life tap hero power anyway. So they're not going to necessarily need Questing Explorer. That just seems like a risky card to run. But others that are more reliant on card draw for some reason or other could absolutely squeeze a card like this one into their list, and it would make a lot of sense. Even with that downside, they may not care because they're either playing more aggressively or they just want some consistency, and Questing Explorer would certainly offer that opportunity. And then finally here we have the Jar Dealer, a 1 mana 1/1 with a death rattle at a random 1 cost minion to your hand. So this reminds me a little bit of something like Acorn Bear we see in Druid today, a 1-drop that when it dies, puts some additional stuff in your hand. The challenge for Jar Dealer, I think, is that it's only giving you 1 additional resource. It has a lower attack value, so it doesn't trade up into 2 drops nearly so easily, and random 1-cost minions can actually be kind of bad on average. They're probably better than squirrels, but again, you only get 1 of them. So although this has some death rattle synergies that some deck out there might actually value, I don't think there's really enough raw power in a card like this. It's not doing things like generating lackeys, for instance, which are much, much better than your average 1-drops. So you've got a weak front end, you've got a weak reward on the death rattle that's not particularly tempo oriented, right? Because it's not leaving anything around on board. It's adding a resource to your hand instead. So you're spending full mana on both of these 1-drops. That just doesn't feel like it's going to do enough or have enough power level or oomph for decks to really consider it. So I think this card will probably fall a little short. And there you go, folks. That wraps it up for the detailed reviews. Now let's jump into the quick reviews. Supreme Archaeology is a 4-star card. Untapped Potential is a 3-star card. Restless Mummy is a 4-star card. Plague of Death is a 4-star card. Puzzle Box of Yogg-Saron is a 4-star card. Evil Totem is a 4-star card. Questing Explorer is a 3-star card. Jar Dealer is a 1-star card. And there you go, guys. Brand new expansion, brand new cards, exciting stuff. Some pretty powerful ones in here, I think. At very least some exciting stuff. We'll see how well it turns out early on. Might take a while for some of these, but I think they have the potential to do some pretty cool things. I'm excited to see even more stuff. Reno Jackson, I'm sure, on the way. So this is going to be a fun expansion reveal season, I'm sure. That said, lots more reviews coming, so please feel free to hit that subscribe button if you enjoyed this. Get those notifications for future videos. I'm going to be pumping out lots and lots of card reviews. I hope you hang out here. Please share your thoughts in the comments below. Don't just listen to me. Listen to everybody's opinions so you can see what they have to say too. That'll make all of us a little bit smarter. But until then, thank you so very much for watching. And until next time, game on.